So I'll go ahead and turn the time over to Gail Dana, she's the Nevada State EPSCoR Director and the NSF EPSCoR Project Administrator, or Director.
Thanks, Marcy, and good morning and welcome to our workshop, Climate Change Science for Effective Resource Management and Public Policy in the Western United States. First of all, I just want to welcome you to Las Vegas and UNLV. Thanks to UNLV and especially to Tom Bihota, who's the Vice President for Research here at UNLV, as well as a PI on this project, for hosting us. This workshop is co-sponsored by the Nevada System of Higher Education, as well as the NSF EPSCoR Western Tri-State Consortium, and that includes Nevada, but also Idaho and New Mexico. And we're funded under a separate NSF EPSCoR grant as a consortium, as a collaborative. We have a collaborative because we share common resource issues in the arid West and research interests in the climate change sciences, as well as in cyber infrastructure. Just as a reminder, because people tend to forget what the acronym means, EPSCoR stands for Experimental Program to Stimulate Competitive Research. And this was started by the National Science Foundation back in the 80s. It's NSF's only state-based program, and it provides funding for infrastructure to increase competitiveness in the state in thematic issues, and in this case for Nevada, it's climate change. So this workshop is a culmination of a 5-year project. We're in year 5. This project will end in end of August. While the project will end, the research will continue, of course. And the funding was brought into Nevada and awarded to Nevada to increase our capability to conduct cutting-edge climate change science and education, and be able to, importantly, communicate this information to stakeholders for use in managing resources and for policy making. And that's partly or mostly what this workshop's about, is that communication and creating collaborations. Just a little bit on the key infrastructure that Nevada built as a result of NSF's funding. Observational stations to measure key climatic, hydrologic, and ecologic variables at 2 elevational transects in Nevada and the Great Basin. Some of you, like myself, went on the field trip yesterday to visit one of these stations out in the Mojave Desert in the Desert National Wildlife Refuge. Quite impressive, these stations. Another key infrastructure piece is the Climate Change Data Portal, which is for ingesting data, for example, from the transects, and for posting educational materials to middle schoolers and other groups. We have new regional climate modeling capabilities as a result of this award. And then, again, the important piece is outreach to stakeholders. So I just want to take a couple of minutes to talk about what went into the planning of this workshop. It was the result of a lot of organizing and contributions from a number of people, and I think a few acknowledgments are in order. The ringmaster and grand organizer for this workshop is Lynn Fenstermaker from the Desert Research Institute. Lynn, can you stand up? She did a lot of work here. As well as Nick Lancaster, who couldn't be here today. He may be able to attend tomorrow. He's also from the Desert Research Institute. Lynn and Nick, and also Scott, as well as Tom Pihota, I mentioned. Scott Mensing and Tom Pihota are PIs on this award, along with myself. And other key people in organizing this are 3 EPSCoR staff members from Nevada. You've heard from Marcy Jackson already. Martha Delgado. Martha, are you in the room somewhere? Okay. And Michelle Castella, who Michelle just walked in. Michelle's the organizer of the poster session. And then we had this really great planning committee who worked with us to structure the workshop. We wanted this to be more of a conversation rather than just talking heads. So we had quite a few people on that committee. Bill Michener from New Mexico EPSCoR. Bill, are you here yet? He will be. Rick Shoemaker from Idaho EPSCoR down here. Keely Brooks from the Southern Nevada Water Authority. Todd Hopkins from the Great Basin LCC and Fish and Wildlife Service. Doug Boyle, who's from the University of Nevada, Reno, who's also our state climatologist. Sean Benner from Boise State University. Helen Neal and one of her graduate students from UNLV. And then, of course, Lynn and Nick and the EPSCoR staff were in on the planning. So I think they had like 10 planning meetings to make this conference work well. Along with that committee, we had our consultants from Concours, Scott McCreary, Megan Vignette, who are our facilitators for this meeting, and they were in on the planning, did a lot of outreach to the stakeholders. You'll see them throughout the meeting helping with facilitation of the discussions. And I've worked with them in the past, and they're really excellent. So they're going to help us get to the outcomes of this meeting. And we also have, I want to thank in advance our plenary speakers, session moderators, and roundtable facilitators who Tom will be talking about in following my little introduction here. So I just want to end by saying that we have a really great group of participants, very diverse, interdisciplinary, from many walks of life, and I have high expectations that you'll leave this workshop with a strong commitment for developing, implementing collaborations on climate change issues in the future. So I hope you enjoy the workshop, and as well as Las Vegas's great spring weather. So Tom, I already introduced Tom, but Tom Pietro is going to talk about the workshop structure and agenda.
All right, thanks, Gail. So I was given the task of being the warm-up act, I guess. They wanted me to, I guess, set the stage a little bit for the workshop. You've got a great lineup there. I also wanted to welcome everyone on behalf of UNLV. I'm the Vice President for Research, but I also wanted to welcome everyone on behalf of President Sumatras, to welcome to UNLV. We're on spring break, so it's a little quiet around here this weekend. So parking's always easy. That's always a good thing. But this is exciting, and it's an exciting group that we have here today. I'm going to be talking a little bit about who's here today and why we're here today, and what the lineup is. And I'm going to do that over the next 15 minutes here. But it's an important workshop that we're doing. It's a culmination of, as Gail said, it's a culmination of the project we've been working on, but it's the continuation of a discussion that we hope to continue too in moving forward. This is important for our state. It's important, UNLV is important for efforts that we're working on, important for efforts that the community's working on too. Just talking with some of the people in the room here this morning and greeting all of you, certainly there's a lot of need for people wanting to talk about climate change, sustainability. You know, these things are things that the community want to talk about, how we move forward as a community, how we move forward as a state. These are topics that are important for our region, the Southwest. If you look at things like the National Climate Assessment, Kelly Redmond's going to be up here in a little bit. Kelly is going to give you a good landscape, and I can tell you I've seen Kelly's presentations before. Kelly always gives us a good landscape of terms of what's going on. But certainly the Southwest, the Western U.S., it's a vulnerable region for climate change, and I think everyone here has probably seen a lot of that, but you want to see even more. Certainly important studies are out there now, like the National Climate Assessment, that are highlighting that in terms of what we need to be doing, what information is out there right now, and what we need to be doing also as communities, whether those are in areas of how snow is changing in water supply, or crops and food yield, or impacts on land management decisions and wildland fires. So there's a lot of important things that we need to think about. And you'll be discussing those today, or discussing those over the workshop. And the landscape will be set by my introductory comment, but really be set by plenary speakers who will set some of that landscape, posters that will be in the back there that will be providing some of the science, but even more importantly, the discussions that you'll be having, and that I'll be talking about what those topics of discussions will be about also. So the key terms here are collaborations, engagement, stakeholder discussions about what are those important discussions for our community to be having about climate change adaptation. So I've already hit on a lot of those, but those are the goals of this conference. And you have these in your, I think you have these in your handout, but if you don't, you will. But really the goals are engagement with key stakeholders and scientists, and that's a mix of you all out there. Informing key stakeholders and scientists, so it's a two-way dialogue going on between stakeholders and scientists about what are those important topics. We want the scientists to hear from the stakeholders, and we also want the stakeholders to hear from the scientists. The identification of key questions, climate change questions, and sometimes we want those questions to be framed by stakeholders, and data needs too, identification of important data needs. Obviously building collaborations is an important part of this, and those are collaborations that can be among scientists and stakeholders, but honestly between scientists too is a big part of this, because we have scientists, particularly our tri-state partners here, that have been meeting a long time, and we want those continued collaborations. And then the last part of this is the initiation of climate change adaptation information and strategies. How do communities move forward with adaptation strategies and take information that can be useful in a changing climate landscape? So those are the key goals of the workshop that we're holding here. With those in mind, I've talked a little bit about who's here, and Gail mentioned it too. It's a real mix of people that are here. It's a mix of scientists, engineers, social scientists, that includes faculty, students, postdocs, but then many stakeholders too. Stakeholders from federal, state, local agencies, private sector, public sector, nonprofits. We have people from the communication sector too, and then obviously our tri-state partners. And I was looking through the attendee list here, and just to give you a sense in terms of who some of these agencies are. Obviously, I said Nevada, New Mexico, Idaho. That's our tri-state partnership. Southern Nevada Water Authority's here, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, San Bernardino County Museum. We have a representative from the Lieutenant Governor's office is here. USDA NRCS is here. Upper Snake River Tribes Foundation, U.S. Forest Service, MGM, KQED, Great Basin LLC, Earth Data Analysis Center. Those are just to name a few. So you can see the broad cross-section. I'm sure I missed a few in there. But as I said, a big part of this is enhancing those collaborations. And we're going to want you to do those through the breaks. I'm sure you saw during the check-in your little dots. Does everyone have a little dot on their thing? Who doesn't have it? Or raise your hand if you have a dot on your thing. Yay. If you don't have a dot on your thing, make sure you have your dot on your little name tag. That's meant to identify kind of what's your background, but hopefully you have more than one dot on there. You know, you don't want to just be a water person or a communications person. Your little, on the center of your table there, it indicates what those dots mean. But those are meant to have you meet different people if you're in the water sector, or you're in the policy sector, if you want to meet another person in there. It's kind of like match, what are the dating services? I forget what those are called. I don't need those, by the way. But it is meant to find people that might be in your area. But if you're a person looking for a policy person or a communication person, it's meant the way to find someone in that area too. What I want to do right now, I'm going to take 2 minutes because I have the time, and so I'm allowed to do that. Stand up. I know it's early, so everyone needs to wake up now. Stand up. Take 2 minutes. This is part of your way of enhancing collaborations. Find someone in the room you don't know. They might be in the table next to you. Introduce yourself to someone you don't know. All right, time's up. Go ahead and sit back down. All right, you guys are a good group. You listen to instructions. You actually did it. It sounded like you were meeting people. Everyone meet somebody you know? Yes? All right, so do that about 10 times now during the breaks and during the poster sessions, and we'll check off number 4 there as outcomes. And we have our evaluator in the back there, right? Hi, Lisa. And she'll be able to check off that one as in terms of our outcomes being achieved for this workshop in terms of research collaborations. So, but it is important that we achieve our outcomes for the workshop, and part of that is our enhancing collaborations, whether those are research collaborations or collaborations with stakeholders. And to start that process, you need to meet the people around you. So identification of those partnerships is part of that process. And as I said before, outcomes is part of this is identification of important questions, whether those are questions that the scientists should be informed of, that stakeholders are interested in, is part of that. Gail mentioned this earlier too, is understanding of the infrastructure. A big part of the research project that Nevada, Idaho, and New Mexico have been working on over the last 5 years is enhancement of research infrastructure to inform climate change science. We want you to understand what is that infrastructure that's been put in place, and how that might be useful for answering important climate change science questions. As I said, 4th one is new research collaborations. And then at the end of this, and our facilitators for this will be talking more about it, is documenting some of this in terms of moving forward in terms of a vision document. The format of the workshop, as I said, you're going to have some impressive plenary speakers who are really going to set the stage for this. Kelly Redmond from the Western Regional Climate Center, who I'll introduce here in a minute, Patricia Mulroy, who a lot of times doesn't need an introduction, and she's a great speaker in terms of talking what this really means for a water agency and how important this issue is for a water agency, really an internationally known speaker in this area. Henry Goltz from the National Science Foundation will be able to speak to this from the standpoint of what this means from the National Science Foundation as in terms of the types of efforts that they support and the direction that they're going. And then on day 2, before that actually, and left off here is before we break for the afternoon, we'll have Scott Mensing, Helen Neal, and Donica Mensing talk about how the roundtable discussions will work. And then on day 2, Vince Tidwell from Sandia National Labs, who have done a lot of work in terms of developing models for stakeholder engagement. When you break out into your sessions, and beforehand you were asked for identification of focus areas, and the different focus areas, groups that you would want to work in, but eventually you'll address all of these. The topical areas that you'll be addressing are ones that were informed. There was a lot of pre-work done with this, and Concur had done some interviews with stakeholders about what were the relevant questions that should be asked in a stakeholder workshop like this. And these were the ones that surfaced and were developed as topical areas that should be addressed in breakout sessions. These are questions that were centered around assessing the effects of climate change and informing adaptation strategies is the first one. Evaluating the current state of climate change planning and identifying opportunities and challenges for businesses, government agencies, and communities is the second one. Where are communities at right now in terms of evaluating climate change planning is really what that second one was focusing on. And then the third one was the communication aspect of this, communicating climate change science for both education, management, and policy perspectives. Those were the 3 areas that are going to be topical areas as breakout sessions, and Donica, Helen, and Scott will be talking about those, how that'll work and the mechanics of that after our plenary speakers talk. The way this will work too, so that the whole afternoon will be, you'll be in your groups and you'll be focusing on those questions. Those group discussions will result in follow-up report that'll come back as from those group discussions. In day 1 of that'll come back as a report, and then day 2 it'll come back in terms of a panel discussion and development of an action plan that'll come back from all of this. That'll help inform that vision document that we talked about earlier. So with that's where we're going with this in terms of plenary speakers, roundtable discussions. I encourage your participation in this. That's what the facilitators are going to be doing, is encouraging your participation. This is meant for you to provide that input to this.